Hello people, welcome back. So this is the second last setup guide that I'm going to publish ever for F1 2021. F1 22 is just around the corner, 2 weeks to go before it releases, just about 2 weeks. And here we are for Japan. Sadly we're not racing in this track for this season in the league, and I really hope we did, because it's one of the fun tracks to drive around. Setup, you can try a million different things around here, but at the end of the day, because it's a very technical circuit, it really relies on your inputs, how you drive around the circuit actually, and how you get along with the flow of the circuit. So let's get into it and see how you can get around a lap in Japan without spinning on the curbs, which are pretty deadly to be honest. And here you go. So 10-7 on the aerodynamics. You may have seen at the spoon earlier, I just missed my apex like a mile and lost about 3 tenths or so. All the advantage, I lost it. And then down the straight as well, I was losing quite a lot of time. But that's where the trade-off comes with this setup, because you want to be able again to have better tire wear, follow through people quite easily in dirty air, and by the time you are on the back straight before 130R, the slipstream alone is gonna make sure you regain about a tenth, at least tenth or two, that you're probably gonna lose by running a higher aero. And then with DRS, ERS, slipstream on the pit straight, you can make an easy overtake if you get a good exit. And to get a good exit, you'll need somewhat of a high downforce setup, or a setup that is really stable on the rear. So here you go, 10-7. I have seen some people run 11-8 in leagues as well. It works out pretty nicely, but for the dries, I'd say you can stick to 10-7 and be pretty good with that. It's not gonna make much of a difference. Obviously, better tire wear, it's a thing if you want to go for that. But again, because it's a very technical circuit, you're probably gonna be focusing more on being on track rather than maximizing the the track limits or going over all curbs to gain time and whatnot. Yeah, so 10-7 or 11-8 is a personal choice. You can go for it. I'll say 10-7 probably will be better for the dries around here. Transmission 90-57, the standard. And again, because it's time trial, the grip is a bit wonky. I like it at 90, just nice. I felt it was meh, just okay. 100% also possible, gives you just slightly better traction off the corners, but because there are a lot of high speed corners here, you are picking up throttle while you're already like in fifth gear, sixth gear. 90% helps to rotate the car a little bit on traction as well, so maybe helps you to get around the corners here a bit easily, and also doesn't stress out the tires that much in a race condition. So 57 of the off throttle, also pretty nice, just to make sure the rears do not slide too much. The higher you go on the off throttle, say towards 60 or something, obviously it's gonna be better for your tire management in a way, so they do not slide too much and they do not overheat that easily. The lower you go, the more the rears are gonna slide and the more heat it's gonna generate. So 57 just nice, especially through the S section, where you'll probably just need to lift or go half throttle to some of the corners, and you can still make it through easily. And while you're following people, you don't really have to brake. Perhaps on heavy fuel at the race start, you may need to just dab on the brakes just a little, just so you do not overuse your front tires by scrubbing it too much under turning. That should be good for you. 56 also possible around here, but I would say again, go with your personal preference, personal choice. You have to try it out. Sometimes you notice a difference, sometimes you do not. I just felt 57 was just slightly better on exits as well, on high speed corners. It kept the car really stable, so I really like that. Suspension geometry, no secrets about this. I think it's been 2 years since F1 2020 onwards. This has been the way to go. Right all the way for the front camber, and then left for everything else. This gives you nice amount of grip through the corners on entry, on exit. Just keeps it nice. Front camber all the way to the front, all the way to the right, gives you good initial entry as well and good exits. A mid corner you can adjust everything else to make sure the car rotates. Rear camber, you have it on maximum. Rear camber gives you good amount of grip on the rear, especially through mid corners, and given that in this game you can put down power as soon as you hit the apex, you want to make sure you have a lot of grip mid corners, so while you're turning you still need a lot of grip. Maximum camber, it's going to give you that. Frontal, you keep it at minimum just so you don't want the car to be too pointy on the front. If it's too pointy, it's gonna turn in nicely. It's gonna be very smooth on turning, but on exits and mid corner it's gonna be very slippery. It's gonna wash away. Rear toe, keeping it minimum so that you get more turning on the rear. The higher you go, the more stable the rear becomes, but it's gonna cause a lot of understeer in the car as well. So keep it like this, you'll be fine. Suspension, again, suspension is where you can customize and you can gain a lot of time out of this. Now 1-1 on the suspension just keeps it pretty stable on the curbs, so you don't really have to worry about touching a curb and risk spinning. It also improves your traction for the rears. Of course, the rears are the ones that driving the car forward, so having a soft rear suspension gives you good amount of traction, especially coming out of the last chicane where it's the possibly the only overtaking chance or the best overtaking chance down into turn 1. So you need a good launch out of the last corner, you need a good amount of traction for that. So soft suspension is going to give you that. Front roll bar again is on 1, gives you best turning. Front suspension on 1 also gives you best turning. Rear anti-roll bar is on 7, so the higher you go, the more the rear is going to move around, creating rotation in the car. The lower you go, the more stable your car becomes. So if you feel perhaps this setup is the way you're using it, or perhaps the way you drive it is a bit oversteery, you can always drop the rear anti-roll bar by 1 click or 2 clicks at most. I wouldn't recommend you going any lower than 5, then you start to get too understeery. 1 click on a roll bar is pretty significant amount of change. You can feel the difference right away, so go with 1 click at a time to make sure you are getting adjusted to the car. Ride height 1.7, pretty high rake, but it's the standard amount of rake in F1 2021. Front ride height is at 1, so the lower your front ride height, the better your initial turning is going to be. And on exits, it's gonna be just okay. Sometimes you can feel like the front is washing out because the car is probably having too much rake, but you can always adjust the other parts of the setup to make sure the exit is good, or you can be smoother on the exit with your throttle input and the steering input. Both have to be pretty smooth and pretty linear so that you can run an aggressive setup, gain time, and not lose time to oversteer or whatnot. Rear right height on 7, I'd say because we are running pretty high downforce here, and generally when you have higher downforce, you're going to be pressing the car more towards the ground. So having slightly higher ride height makes sure that your rear is not bottoming out on traction, on acceleration. So I'll keep it at 7 on the rear ride height so that it gives me good nice smooth traction out of corners, and even in high speed corners like through the SS, it doesn't bottom out. That's the important thing. Otherwise, when you throw the car into the corner and suddenly the rear just slides away, it's probably you have too aggressive of a suspension setup, or probably you have very low ride height, or you have too much ride height. When you have too much rake, it also can wash out easily. So keep it like this, pretty nice. You can go with 2 front ride height, that will generate a little bit of understeer in the car. If you feel that is what's needed in the car, you can try that out. Brakes 151. Surprisingly, I have tested out 50% as well. It works in the race. When you're in heavy fuel, you're not really pushing the car for maximum lap time in a qualifying or something. In the race condition, you want to be pretty smooth, and when you're going slow and smooth, you can always run 50% brake bias. But into the last corner, the last chicane, that's where I recommend you running 51% brake bias, because it keeps the car pretty stable for some reason. I mean, obvious reasons. It's you're pushing more load to the front, removing load from the rear so that the rear is more stable. That helps you to keep the car pretty nice and stable in the entry and mid corner as well. And if you can sort out your entry and mid corner, exit is going to be even easier. On exit, when you head down to turn 1, I'd say that's also a good place to set your brake bias to 51. A reason is because as you are throwing your car into the apex, it's a long apex there, double apex or whatever, that double right hander in turn 1. So you want to make sure you can trail brake into the corner without losing the rear tires, without losing the rear of the car. So sometimes 1% brake bias forward really helps in that sense. Everywhere else throughout the lap, I'd say keep it at 50%, or even if you feel like you need to run 51% all the way, sure, go for it. It definitely helps. And tire pressures, once again, rears are on the maximum so that you get best tire life and also maximum stability. Time trial, if you feel the car is wonky, just ignore it for whatever reason it is. It's always like that. The moment you jump into Grand Prix and online mode, you're gonna feel the grip is so much different. There's a lot more grip to be offered there rather than the one that you feel in time trial. So high pressures, you're gonna feel nicer in Grand Prix and online mode. So keep it like that. And front tire pressures, again, they work in the same way. Higher pressure means less tire wear, more tire temps, better stability, the usual. But tires are prone to overheating around here, so you have to adjust your front tire pressures to make sure they do not overheat that much. If you do not have an issue with overheating, if your driving is super smooth, and you can always experiment with running higher pressure so that you get less tire wear. If you want to balance out the front and rear tire wear as well, you can do that by adjusting the tire pressures. Say if your fronts are wearing out too much, you can increase the tire pressure so that they wear out slightly less. If the fronts are wearing out a little slowly for some reason, so your race already at maximum, you want it that way. But if you get more rear tire wear in the race and in your practice race, so maybe for the next race, reduce your front tire pressure so that they wear out slightly more and the balance of the car remains about the same with the same amount of tire wear. That's a good tip for you to take home. Now let's quickly jump over the setup once again. 10.7 is what you can do. You can also run 11.8 if you want to in the race. Alright, but remember, once you are into the race already, there's no more adjustments you can do in park firmly, so make sure you set your setup. If it's going to be a big condition race, I'd say just go for the high downforce setup, because you're gonna be doing well in the wets, and in the dries you're gonna have a lot more pace as well throughout the whole race. For qualifying, can keep it like this, and as you are going through the race, whatever wing that you start on, perhaps on your second stint, even if you go on the mediums or the softs, you can drop the wing by 1 so that the front doesn't get too pointy as your fuel gets lighter. 10.7, I'd say good start, or 11.8. In the wets, I'd say go 11.8 or 11.9 even. 11.10, up to you. The more rear wing you have, the better your braking and acceleration is going to be. You have to make sure that you get adjusted in the practice so that you know how the conditions feel in different setup. It's always a thing you have to do, otherwise you will never ever understand how your car behaves in the race. So yeah, transmission, keep it at 90, 57 or 157. I'd say I'll prefer 90 over 100 in Japan, just because there's a lot of high speed corners, and having high on throttle like 100 is just gonna stress out the rear tires a lot and create a lot of understeer. 90, 85, 80, I'd say it's more of a comfortable range for the race. Off throttle, 57, just nice as well. For qualifying, you can keep it at 57 also. In some cases, if you feel in qualifying the car is too snappy, you can go up 58 actually. If you feel the car is understeering in qualifying, you can go 56. That's an interesting dynamic there. For the wet conditions, always lower your off throttle by 1% at least. Lowest you should go probably is 55 in the dries, 54 in the wets. That's just nice. Gives you more rotation as you go lower. So keep like this. Suspension geometry, no changes required. Suspension, also no changes required, but raising the front right height by 1 should be more than enough of a change if there's a mixed condition race or if it's a full wet race. Reason is you want a bit of ground clearance so that you do not bottom out while accelerating or braking in the wets. So it will create a bit of understeer, but in the rain, once you get used to the conditions, you're going to be hitting the same lap times pretty consistently. Brakes 150 also. Again, you can run 51 in the wets. You can always get away with 50% because it is easier to lock up the fronts in the wets. So run it at 50% throughout the whole race if it's wet. Tire pressures, you can run the same. You can even run slightly higher in the rain because the tires do not overheat as much as the dry tires do, but you want to keep it about the same just in case if it's a mixed condition race. So keep it at a pressure that you will be happy with for the dries. So yeah, that's about it. 10-8, 11-8 or 10-7 on the setup. On the wings, 90-57 transmission, right left 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 geometry, 1-1 1-7 1-7 suspension, 151 for the brakes, and then tire pressures 23.8 on the front, 23.5 on the rear. And that is Japan for you. And well, looking at the times alone, it's pretty underwhelming. I haven't done much of a work on this track ever since the game released. Perhaps just 1 or 2 odd races here and there, but never seriously done anything around here. So yeah, make sure you try it as well, and see you in the final one, which is going to be in China. So I will be racing there as well as my race, my season finale. Next up is Abu Dhabi, and then it's going to be China finale. Odd reasons, but whatever, don't care about that. And yeah, see you soon, take care, and ciao.